All right, so I'd like to start by thanking you very much for your time today, Judge Medina. My name is Shana Fernandez-Watts, and I'm a labor and employment attorney with a law firm here in Phoenix, Arizona, Rusing, Lopez, and Lizardi. I'm also one of the chairs for the Appointments Committee for Los Abogados, and we're very honored to have you and for you to take the time to speak with us today a little bit about your pathway to the bench.
Well, thank you very much, but it's my honor.
All right. Well, I'd like to start out with some softball questions about a little bit about yourself, and then we're going to get right into the meat of your pathway to the bench and what it looks like to be a justice on the court. So, can you tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Sure. I was born in Mexico. I was born in Francisco y Madero, Durango, Mexico, which is very close to the capital of the state of Durango. And I was brought into the United States when I was about 9 years old. My father and mother had separated or divorced, and then she brought me when she came up to work and study here in the United States. That was to Yuma, Arizona. So I grew up in Yuma, Arizona, for the most part for junior high school, and went to college from there. Was fortunate to receive a scholarship to go to Stanford University, and then I came back to Yuma because my first job was at Arizona Western College as director of extended education.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so Stanford undergrad, and then what inspired you to go to law school from there?
Well, various things. One, my father was a judge, and he was an attorney in Mexico. I didn't get to know him a whole lot because he died when I was about 5 years old. But, you know, that the whole thing lingered. And so I knew that was part of the background. But I think what motivated me more so was the fact that I must have been raised with a good moral compass. And I think a lot of the people from the state of Durango in those areas have a general idea of what a moral compass is in regards to concepts of what is fair, not fair, just and unjust. Because one of the things that the state of Durango is famous for is alacranes, which is scorpions, and the other one is Pancho Villa. Mm-hmm. And Pancho Villa was a revolutionary that was born and raised in Mexico, and he was fighting for the rights of people versus the rights of rich people. And so everybody grows up with that understanding, with that knowledge. It's kind of like the Robin Hood story kind of a thing, and depending on how you look at it. But nonetheless, that added to the development of those concepts of fairness and justice.
All right. So you went to undergrad Stanford, then which law school did you go to?
Well, I went to undergraduate at Stanford, and then I studied for a master's in criminal justice at Arizona State University. And then I did a diploma in international commercial and immigration law at the University of San Diego Law School.
All right. And where did you go right after law school?
After that, I was the first job that I had that I was offered was to go work at Arizona Western College to be director of extended education. And so I went to work in Yuma. I was always very interested in educational issues. My mother was a teacher for about 30 years, maybe 35 years. And so we were always involved with those kinds of issues and the issues that had to do with English as second language, bilingual education, and so forth. One of the reasons that I decided to go back to Yuma and take that job at Arizona Western College was because my mother was involved in a civil rights lawsuit against the Somerton Elementary School District. And that was because number one, they were not allowing the kids to speak Spanish in the classroom or outside the classroom or in the cafeterias. And she didn't feel that was right. The other thing is that they were taking the kids out of her classroom to put them in special education classes because they had been tested and had low scores, but they were primarily because they did not have the language skills to respond well to the tests. And then in addition to that, she complained to them because of the fact they only had 6 books out of 2,000 volume library, and she wanted to have more books in Spanish so that the kids could at least learn some of the substantive subjects. Anyway, the point is that there was a lawsuit that arose out of that, and she was feeling the pressure, and I, as her only son, felt that it was necessary to go and be supportive. I was lucky enough to be able to obtain a job at Arizona Western at the same time. So we did a lot of educational work, and then we started some political activity as well that made some changes in that community.
Very interesting. All right, and then how long was it before you applied for the bench, or when did you
Well,
decide?
after that, what happened? There was a big case that occurred there in Yuma at the bottom of the Colorado River, and it was a border patrol agent that had shot a Mexican national in the back with expensive bullets, like the ones they used to kill President Kennedy, the ones that are illegal. You're not supposed to even use them in war. And they left a big old hole, left the gentleman paralyzed. He had 8, 9 kids, a wife that had very little education. And the Mexican consulate was involved. And then Richard Treon, attorney at law, and John Aguirre went down there to look at this case, and they needed to get documentation. They talked to me, and they said, well, people referred them to me, and I knew John, from ASU. And so then they offered me a job there at the firm to help them with that case and other cases at the and also to help being an advisor on international consular affairs, because they wanted him to be the legal counsel to the Mexican consulate. So I said, hey, great. And they doubled my pay, so it was even more interesting. So I came and I worked in that position for quite a while. And then thereafter, my wife was given a job, offered a job in Santa Barbara as the Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. I went with her, took the kids, and then I was fortunate to get a job as a city manager. And a city manager in a rural area, very close, about 10 minutes away from where Cesar Chavez, La Paz, Keene, where he's buried and where he did a lot of his organizing, very close to Delano. And I was confronted with a lot of interesting injustices there in the Bakersfield surrounding areas, in that whole Central Valley area. And I had to make a lot of changes in terms of the way that things were administered, managed, and the philosophy of that town and the surrounding areas as to how to treat the migrant community and the farm workers. So I did some of that work, and then came back. I was asked to come and see if I could work with Arizona Fair Housing Center as the executive director there, and I helped them with that for about 3 or 4 years. Then a vacancy opened up because a judge left the bench as a justice of the peace, and that meant that Steve Gallardo, who has this particular district of the downtown precinct, had the opportunity to recommend to the other board members who to replace this judge on a temporary basis until that term was over. And he went through a vetting process. I was selected, and so I served in that capacity. I'm serving in that capacity as we speak, and I was appointed in July 26th of 2017. So it's about a year and a half now. And then, of course, I just went through the election process. I was fortunate to win the primary, and since this is a majority Democratic district, it's pretty much understood that I will be elected on November the 6th. Which means that I will be here for another 4 years.
Mm-hmm. Yay! All right. Well, that sounds like a very interesting background, something that I know I personally, my path was not very similar to that. So if you could talk a little bit more about, the application process for our members, like if someone was interested, let's talk about what your position is now and what the application process is normally or would be normally.
A couple of things I wanted to share with you is one, number one, to be a justice, there's 26 justices of the peace in Maricopa County. Justices of the peace do not have to be attorneys. They can be anybody that wants to run for elected office. That's different from municipal judges who have to be JPs or magistrates of a municipality that also have to be attorneys and sanctioned by and approved by the bar. Now, what we have here, as well as in the municipal courts, is what are called judges pro tems. judges pro tems are people that substitute the justices of the peace when they go to training, where they go to conferences, where they take vacation and so forth, and they have to be trained and act as judges in the absence of a justice of the peace. The canons of the judiciary are the same. They apply from the Supreme Court justice on down to all of us, and they are the ones that supervise our behavior and make sure that we stay within the parameters of behavior that are sanctioned, are expressed and defined by the judiciary canons. The justice pro tems, what I wanted to tell you is where I have been trying to get applicants or people to apply, and because right now we have, I don't know the exact number, I believe it's 35, 36 justice pro tems, but in that area, I personally feel that right now we do not reflect the face of our community. I can tell you that the justices of the peace do not reflect the face of our community, but you know, that's an elective process. There's not much control other than to say if you want to run, you run. If other people want to run, they run, and whoever gets elected gets elected, and they are then the justices of the peace. But in the pro tem area, we as justices of the peace can nominate people to be pro tems, and that process occurs yearly in September. The justice, a judge can nominate an individual who is interested, write a letter of support, and then the person has to submit an application. The person submits an application that is reviewed by a pro tem committee that is composed by members of the Justice of the Peace bench. After that review, they are then, those that are recommended are presented to a meeting of the bench, of the Justice of the Peace bench, and then upon approval, they go for a review and approval of the presiding judge of the Superior Court that is over the Justice Court system. And then the final approval goes to the Board of Supervisors. And so that's pretty much the process right there. Takes a little bit of while, takes a little bit of time, but I personally think it's worth it because we're dealing with a lot of cases in which many people go through, and I would even venture to say that the justices of the peace and the municipal courts are the ones that handle almost 90% of the criminal and civil traffic cases, evictions, small claims and civil cases under 10,000, and then have to deal with the issuance of orders of protection and injunctions against harassment.
Okay. So I feel like the teacher in me wants a whiteboard to show, justice of the peace, judge pro tems substitute in for justice of the peace when they have their vacation time or they're not able to cover certain cases. And those judge pro tem positions that there are about 35, 36 positions for are the ones where my understanding is, there's an advocacy component to try to get a better representation of diversity in those positions. So I'm just recapping a little
Yes,
bit, but
the canons say that we're not supposed to be involved in advocacy, but I think I would, from my personal perspective, there is an interest in making sure that we reflect the face of our community, at least in the Justice of the Peace pro tem bench.
So even it's not even political advocacy, and I would definitely make sure we're not pushing that, but it's more advocacy for applicants, qualified applicants to apply for the position, and to increase that pool of people, which
Absolutely,
is always a great thing. So what would you say are some of the biggest challenges to applying?
The biggest challenges to applying is just, number one is information. I think a lot of people, and I as the Justice of the Peace, had been on the bench already for half a year before I even knew how that whole process worked. And I know for sure after speaking with various attorney friends of mine and various organizations that they don't really have an understanding, or they don't have information regarding what the position is and how what the process is to become a justice pro tem. So I appreciate your efforts here to try to get that word out, because again, I feel that it's important that the people that are substitute judges or justice pro tems reflect the face of our community, and our community, the clientele that we receive, the people that come before us are very diverse. I would say at the very, very minimum, 50% members of the minority community, and yet our pro tem bench is not.
Okay. What would be the first step for someone who is interested in applying for
The first step would be to, if necessary, to contact the leadership of Los Abogados and let them know that they're interested, and or they can communicate with me directly if they have an interest, or if they want to discuss it further to obtain more information. Maybe through Los Abogados or individually, they can also come and visit either my court or any Justice of the Peace court, so that they can see the kinds of issues that we deal with, and also the kinds of procedures that we have to implement. And that way they can then make a determination whether they want to go that route or not, or whether they would be interested. Personally, again, I think that our clientele would benefit, our bench would benefit, our community would benefit, and the individual participants would also benefit, because I think it would give them an experience into the judgeship. People that might want to be judges in the future could get a little taste of this aspect of judging that might give them the confidence or the understanding of what a judge really does or what they do, so that if they do want to get interested or want to pursue that route, that they can follow up. Mind you, this is a little bit different than, of course, the Superior Court judges, because they're, it's a little bit different process right there.
All right. And is there any advice that you would give to lawyers considering?
My advice is to come forth and to participate and to be part of this process, because this definitely gives you a greater understanding of the judiciary system and the importance of the justice of the peace and the municipal court system. As I mentioned, and I think I mentioned before, that I think 90% of the people that come before the judiciary come before those courts. We get to see 90% of the people that go before the court system. We are the face of the judiciary, to be very honest with you. That's how I feel. I think a lot of people realize that as well. And so it's important, I think, to have people that have, number one, the knowledge, the understanding, and the understanding of the clientele, maybe even the compassion to be able to deal with people that are from different cultures, speak different languages, come from different communities, and sometimes that's important to make these determinations as to how to mete out justice and how to apply the laws and regulations that we are required to do.
Great. A little bit now into the logistics of it, on the time frame and what time of year should people start. Obviously start as early as they can, yes, in terms of speaking with people, but when is the application process? At
the very latest, I would say August, because generally the applications have to be in there by the 1st of September. Mm-hmm. August would be great to start the preparation. And again, they don't have to necessarily come to me. They really should also look to any justice of the peace throughout the valley to try to speak to the individuals to see if those judges want to sponsor anybody to be a justice, a judge pro tem. It doesn't just have to be me. There's 26, and we're all over the place. And so there may be an interest in a specific area, and to get to know the judges there, or to get to know the courts and the type of clientele would be important. And but like I say, I've offered my time and my resources in case somebody has any questions. But definitely, I would start at the very latest in August. If they want to do it beforehand, that's fine, but the applications have to be in by September. The applications are not overly complex. It's a one-page, various questions, a resume, and a letter of interest. That's pretty much it. Once that's received, together with the letter of recommendation or the communication of recommendation and sponsorship by a judge, a justice of the peace, it goes to the pro tem committee. They review it, they set up the schedule to interview people, they interview them, and from there make recommendations and go through the process I described earlier.
All right. Well, I can't tell you, I've spoken with you a couple times now, and every time I speak with you, I feel like I learned something new. So thank you
Well,
so much for your time today. And we're here in your office at the downtown precinct for the Justice Court today. So we'll try to get a few pictures of that on the way out as well for the video.
Yeah.
And otherwise, again, I just really appreciate you taking
Thank
the
you.
time to do
Thank
this.
you for coming. As we finish, I will give you a mini tour, and I would be more than willing to do that with other people who might be interested in coming in, becoming pro tems, or just to learn more a little bit more about the justice courts. I think it's I think anybody and everybody would be surprised as to what we do and how much we do, and the importance of the time that we put to see clients, because I'm talking to at least anywhere between 30 and 60 people per day in the morning. No, that's a lot of people.
A lot of people. Yep.
26 courts. It's a lot of people. So thank you very much for
thank
your
you.
time, your efforts. I think this is a great project that you're undertaking, and I think that people will be able to better understand part of this part of the legal system.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you.